Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update, first part thereof for the 22nd of August 2025. There's a lot of data to go through. Let's get cracking on. We're going to start with the Ukrainian general staff figures. For the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply. You can find them linked in the description below. We have some pretty interesting numbers. First of all, 790 personnel lost is one of the lowest we have seen for a long time. Below 800 even. 4 tanks and 3 troop-carrying AFVs, very low in those, but typically so categories. 46 artillery systems taken out. That is a pretty good number, and that's typical as well. We see above average artillery losses and below average combat asset losses like tanks, AFVs. We got a single MLRS and a single anti-aircraft warfare system. That's pretty good. Very high number of drones, as I mentioned last night. Sorry, not last night, yesterday when I did my hits and losses video. The drone, the timing for these figures to get cut off sits in the middle of the night. So there weren't 318 drones sent over last night and intercepted. In fact, there was somewhere around 50 drones sent over last night. So that is from half of the night before, and it gets cut off halfway. And that's why a big 574 drone attack will be split over 2 days of, or 2 nights of data to information sheets like this. 33 cruise missiles, so most of the cruise missiles from the night before, remember there were 40 sent, will be registered on this this information sheet. 110 vehicles and fuel tanks as well. That's above 100, fairly decent number there. So what I think we can see here is that the Russians probably aren't attacking as much as they were. And I'm getting this sense from claims of movement on the front line that the Ukrainians are actually making some gains in a number of places. Like they're making gains in Pokrovsk, not just in that bunny ear sector where they were counter-attacking that deep reconnaissance group infiltration and then the subsequent exploitation troops. Not only they've done a good job there, but I think they are counter-attacking a number of other places. A village called Tolstoy, for example, was retaken by the Ukrainians. They're also counter-attacking up in Sumy, as we know, and having success there. The Russians have been pulling out of there. And a couple of other places as well. And you're thinking, that's interesting. So the Ukrainians could be, I don't know that it's not like a counter-offensive or anything like that, but there seem to be a number of smaller counter-attacks that aren't just completely isolated counter-attacks. For example, if we see here, several Ukrainian sources report the counter-offensive operations are underway in the Pokrovsk sector. So counter-offensive operations, that's a slightly bigger term for the activity that's going on in Pokrovsk, possibly. Most likely on the southern and southeastern outskirts of the city. So not just that, remember that infiltration area, but now we're talking pushing the Russians back from the edges of the city on the southeastern and southern outskirts there. So that is significant. Then we hear here that during a night sortie, the Ukrainian Defense Forces captured enemy personnel and seized a small area on the left bank of the Kherson region. So pushing across the bank on the Dnipro River there. So a couple of interesting anecdotes to suggest that perhaps the Ukrainians are pushing in a few places that they otherwise weren't. Okay, let's look at a few more personnel topics. So we start with the iStories data that I talked about the other day that shows that the recruitment numbers for contracted troops for the Russian armed forces has massively dropped in Q2, as in significantly. So 37,900 people signed a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense in Q2. That equates to around about, so if we're talking 4 weeks, 3 months, you're talking about 12,000 or so recruits a month. Now, they were claiming they were recruiting 30 to 40,000. They also need replacements, to replace their casualties. They need to be operating, I mean, it was about 1,000 a day. They'd be needing 30,000. It's dropped a little bit. Let's say 25,000. Well, if they're getting 12,000 and they need 25,000, then there's a net loss there. And I said this is really, really significant for those reasons. Now, I also mentioned they could be getting troops from other places, such as conscripted troops that aren't signing contracts, that they can be used up in Kursk region. Prisoners might have a different system whereby they're not being paid, but they are being drafted into the armed forces and given, so no pay, but given freedom after however many months or however it works. Anyway, Tatarikami looks at this and says, iStories recently reported that Russian recruitment was falling, citing federal budget data on sign-up bonuses. In reality, enlistment still runs above 30,000 a month, is his claim. So I don't know. And the dip reflects changes in published data, not an actual slowdown. There are a few nuances though. They reported that several regions, including Irkutsk and Vladimir, are struggling with recruitment. That is true. This has been an issue in many areas, and that helps explain the steady rise in sign-up bonuses. Some recruits even register in other regions to secure higher payouts. Still, despite ever higher bonuses, Russia has found ways to offset shortfalls by drawing from the freshly detained and pre-trial prisoners, while increasingly pressuring illegal immigrants and conscripts into signing contracts. So that's what I was talking about. These measures affect the quality and morale of the forces and further strain an already overburdened budget, yet quotas continue to be met. And in fairness to iStories, whose investigative work I greatly respect, they cited Yanis Kluger's calculations pointing at no decline. So there are contradictory, or not contradictory, but the data is nuanced, right? They are definitely getting fewer signed-on contracted recruits, right? So this is significant. That's a huge downturn from quarter one and from quarter four in 2024. In fact, these are the lowest stats since quarter two in 2023 in 2 years. So this is significant. Are they definitely able to replace all of those losses with illegal migrants and prisoners? I doubt it, because they've cleaned out prisons already to a large degree. Are they meeting their targets? Well, some indications that they are. So maybe I'm wrong, but I guess those will be official data points. And are they to be trusted? Anyway, it is. My guess is that the Russians are going to be struggling to recruit at this point in the war still. Like the Ukrainians are. This isn't like, oh, look at the Russians, woe them, the Ukrainians are going to mince them. Ukrainians are massively struggling to recruit, as we know, and they have smaller population. Lots of people evade recruitment, and that's going to be the same for the Russians as well. But the data, I think, is nuanced. I would love to know the absolute truth here. I am speculating that the Russians are struggling to meet those quotas, and I again, though it's speculation, I doubt they're meeting 30 to 40,000 a month still, but they may well be. Who knows? Ukrainian, right? And then this is worth noting. I put this in this section actually, and I've got a massive hits and losses, distance strike section going on here, where I have some more details of that drone strike that you've got. There it is. I'm just going to bring that forward because it gives some more detail. Okay. What has happened? So Novorossiysk, which is where the Black Sea Fleet is now stationed, is that port on the Russian coast of the Black Sea. We hear that Ukrainian naval drone exploded there, killing 5 elite Russian divers, according to intelligence, the Ukrainian intelligence. The HUR identified naval reconnaissance divers as members of the Russian commando Frogmen, an elite unit that receives top-level training, significant funding, and advanced equipment. However, this wasn't a drone that went and blew them up on purpose, as far as I can work out. It appears that the drone had actually lost contact due to electronic warfare. Divers went to go and retrieve it, and it blew up. And I don't know whether the Ukrainians were able to blow it up when the divers came close. Maybe that could be a plan. I mean, the best case scenario for Ukraine is that that's exactly what they planned. They pretended it was lost from electronic warfare. It was floating around. They waited for people to come and pick it up, and then they blew it up. I have no knowledge as to whether that happened. That's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario, it lost contact due to electronic warfare, and maybe the divers just accidentally knocked it or something, and it exploded. So a Ukrainian sea drone operated by the HUR detonated in Novorossiysk Bay, killing 5 elite Russian naval divers. The explosion happened after Russian forces tried to recover the drifting drone, which had lost connection due to electronic warfare. Either way, though, that's actually a pretty good result for the Ukrainians. Already mentioned that there are some gains for the Ukrainians in a couple of smaller places. And then we're going to go on to the loss figures for from Andrew Perpetua for the Russians and Ukrainians. As you can see, yesterday was a very bad day for the Russians, losing an awful lot of civilian trucks, meaning a lot of logistics capacity. The Ukrainians yet again losing a lot of MRAPs and mobility vehicles. I asked Andrew about that and I didn't quite understand his answer. Hey mate, why are so many Ukrainian MRAPs over the last few days being taken out? He says, I don't know, people want attention, I guess. I don't know if he I don't know, there's a breakdown in communication there. So I don't quite know why the Ukrainians are still losing a lot of MRAPs and infantry mobility vehicles, unless we go back to, like I said to you before, the only time you lose those types of vehicles, or the most common time for losing that type of vehicle, is when you are on attack. So if the Ukrainians are genuinely attacking up in Sumy, genuinely attacking around Pokrovsk and other areas of the front line, then that would explain why the Ukrainians are losing more vehicles, because they are actually doing some kind of counteroffensive. The difference between a Ukrainian counteroffensive and a Russian counteroffensive appears to be the types of equipment they use. So the Russians will use ATVs and unarmored vehicles such as golf buggies and quads, motorcycles and SUVs and larders. We saw a larder the other day getting blown up, larder with no doors, driving full of Russian soldiers, blowing up on a mine. So that's what they are using near the front line, out on the front line, to move into the contact zone, to attack Ukrainian troops even. So what this might signify is that both sides are attacking in different places, but the Ukrainians are using proper equipment and the Russians aren't. And when the Ukrainians lose stuff, they're losing more expensive MRAPs and the Russians are losing SUVs and whatnot. But it's also worth noting that Andrew Perpetua includes down here, Russians had some logistics-based fun. And what this looks like is a single road with an absolute ton of Russian losses. I'd love to know where this is actually. Ukrainka. There is a Ukrainka in the Pokrovsk direction, I think just south of Pokrovsk. So that could be where that is. But my goodness, the Russians have lost an absolute ton of vehicles there. And then that translates into that list with all of those destroyed civilian vehicles there. Anyway, we'll look at the Ukrainian losses first. And as per normal, we see a lot of surveillance and comms equipment, UGVs. We're going to kind of ignore them. We've got a couple of boats there, a couple of bits of artillery, nothing serious. A tank, including a track guard and a shed, T-72, T-64. Old BMP-1 on the list as damage. We've got some APCs, including potentially a striker, FV-432, so a British provided one, and then a couple of older BTRs, half of them damaged, half of them irretrievably lost, and then quite a lot of MRAPs here, possibly even over 20. And that's another huge list. Many of them unlabeled. Otherwise, we've got Max Pros mainly, Kirby, as well as a British provided Mastiff, and then a couple of Senators as well from Canada, so on and so forth. And then a bunch of Humvees there, half a dozen, 7 of them. Most of the infantry mobility vehicles damaged, just about, and then about almost 50-50, slightly over 50% irretrievably lost for the MRAPs. Then we have 4 trucks, a bunch of ATVs, not too many, but some quads and buggies, and then, as per usual, a lot of civilian vehicles for the Ukrainians as well. They are losing a lot. Look at this: Vandal drone, Vandal drone, Vandal drone, Vandal drone, Vandal drone. In fact, right up and down this list, a couple of Lancets further up the top, but we have Vandal drones featuring massively here. So the Vandal drone is a huge problem for the Ukrainians. They are losing a lot of trucks logistically, as well as the Russians losing that. But then when we go to the Russian list, we see a real preponderance of Russian SUVs and unarmored vehicles, couple of electronic warfare bits of kit at the top, and like the Ukrainians, a boat on there, destroyed boat. We've got some artillery, some T-30s, and a Mr. B. We have about half dozen tanks there. A couple of them, or one of them is a track guard and shed, and then a range of others. BMP-2, BTRs, for APCs and IFVs, got 5 of them all destroyed. And then we're on to trucks, 5 of those, ATVs, a whole bunch of motorcycles and quads. And then we're down to civilian vehicles, and it's this tremendous list of civilian vehicles. Pickup Lada, pickup trucks, flatbed loafs, Bobics, party loafs. Those are the Bakanka Scooby-Doo vans, but with a kind of flatbed and sides, so that you could have a party on the back if you so desired. Unknown cause for most of these, because I presume you've just got pictures of flaming wrecks. I'm not quite sure what did the damage. So it's not that they were caught on, it's not that these were released on Ukrainian drone footage necessarily from the drones hitting them. It's just so you know, it's an FPV drone. I think you've got an image coming from that road of death, and you're just listing a whole bunch of destroyed equipment. So bad day at the office for the Russians. The Ukrainians really having some success, probably in the Pokrovsk direction, in terms of taking out Russian logistics. Another, I think I may have shown this one, but there have been so many BM-21 Grad multiple launch rocket systems getting destroyed recently. This is another one that absolutely goes up. I mean, this is a huge, the resolution is all distorted there, but if you watch it in real time, I mean, that's a massive explosion caught by a spotted drone there as well, worth going to see in a Pokrovsk direction. So it's another BM-21 Grad disassembling in a violent fashion. We're here, interesting picture. This is a Russian motorized infantryman. In other words, it's a cavalryman on a motorbike here with a huge drone jammer on the back. And one wonders whether it's actually a drone jammer that works, because we have a drone right next to him that still appears to be functional. I don't know whether it cuts out just before it hits him, but it looks like that was maybe his last moment on his back in the camera of a Ukrainian FPV drone. So a huge drone jammer there. Now, it looks like the Russians have adapted their Orlan reconnaissance drones. These are your cheapest chips reconnaissance drones. Looks like it's just about to get hit by an interceptor, though. It has to be said. But these drones are not particularly expensive and are still doing a job for the Russians in terms of reconnaissance, sort of medium to long range. But as you can see here, they've been adapted to carry FPV drones as well. And one presumes that this Orlan will also act as a repeater, so that those drones have the range of the Orlan drone, because otherwise they wouldn't. So that is an adaptation that the Russians have achieved there. So we have, I don't know, a bit of Russia on fire here, but this morning a DAF truck carrying a tanker truck with aviation fuel burned down on the Druzhba-Sochi highway. That is good news. So aviation fuel not getting to its destination there in Russia. It could be on the way to a civil aviation endpoint, or it could be going to a military airbase. Let's hope the latter. But anyway, it all helps Ukraine's ends there. Right, then we go on to distant strikes and a much quieter night for Ukraine. Here we have 55 drones sent in and 46 being taken out. That's not a bad interception rate at all. So that is also indicative that the Russians are unable to fire those huge numbers of drones on a consistent basis. We had that huge drone attack last night, and then it goes back down to 55 today. And even though I was saying that the Russians have had their drone supply chain or manufacturing, for the Shahed drones hit by the Ukrainians, I think, looking at the numbers, and then they had that massive attack last night. You could say, well, you don't know what you're talking about because they had a massive attack. But actually, you look at the stats before that, and you would have expected a larger attack earlier than that, or more attacks of maybe slightly less than last night, slightly fewer, but more regularly, and we haven't. So it's been a real sort of low number of attacks right up to that spike yesterday. But I think if you compare that to a couple of months ago, the stats are generally lower for Shahed drones, and they're definitely lower for missile attacks as well. So the Ukrainians have done, through Operation Spiderweb and through the consistent attacks of these facilities, I think a good job of limiting the Russian attacks, nightly attacks, but it still needs to continue. More needs to happen, and we'll talk about that in a wee while. So what happened last night, I don't know of any drone successes or any information about battle damage assessment. Actually, nothing from the Ukrainians at all, which is odd because we're hearing about all these new drones that they're manufacturing and missiles. But anyway, Tim White says, not included in the overnight figures are FPV drones, aerial guided glide bombs, and the reason for the latter being they're not self-propelled rockets or long-range drones, and you can't shoot them down, and these are kind of, shoot-down stats that we see there. Kostiantynivka has again been very badly hit by these awful and plentiful weapons, with many homes destroyed. So Kostiantynivka is very close to the front line. It is taking one hell of a beating, and it's not good there. I mean, look at the damage to Kostiantynivka here. More residential blocks being targeted and being hit by the Russians' guided glide bombs. I mean, this is their idea of liberation, and it's despicable. Countless buildings, including the post office, gas pipelines, gas distribution systems, so some energy infrastructure as well. Whole town is now without gas for the foreseeable future. The officials saying repair won't be possible due to constant shelling. I mean, yeah, Kostiantynivka is worse than Kherson, I would have thought at the moment. Just, it must be hell living there. Other major hits came in Kharkiv, Chuhiv as well, swarmed by attack drones. Mayor of the town says the target was a non-working industrial enterprise. Empty warehouse buildings were damaged. No injuries, but the Russians giving some attention to a number of places. But it wasn't as bad as other nights that we've seen. What else are we hearing? Here is I think a very important video. This is a Wild Hornets video using their Sting anti-Shahed drone. So Wild Hornets is a non-profit drone manufacturing organization that's really been at the forefront of drone innovation and provision for the Ukrainian armed forces. Here, their interceptor drone is caught on camera taking out a couple of Shaheds, and that is significant. Interesting, they go near the Shahed and blow up. Obviously, it's got some kind of proximity fuse because that one flies to the side of it and then explodes, one presumes, knocking out the wing and taking out the Shahed. So that is good to see happening. Hopefully, more regularly, we'll see these interceptors being used. I had this in the wrong order. Russia attacked Kostiantynivka with fab bombs and FPV drones, 21 residential buildings, 5 administrative buildings, a mall, an infrastructure object, gas pipelines and other objects damaged. I mean, yeah, just horrific. The Russians, no compunction in taking out civilians at all. It's just, anyway, not to move on too quickly, because actually we're going to dwell on the death of civilians. So Russia killed 3 generations of Ukrainians in a single night the other night on the August 18th, so 4 nights ago, when Russia attacked a Kharkiv apartment building. A 45-year-old father, Ruslan Serha. It's just good. It's not good. It's important to remember the human costs here and show the human costs. 38-year-old mother, Tetiana Morozova, and a 1.5-year-old daughter, Mia, and a 16-year-old son, Artem. Just horrific what the Russians do. That's when they hit the roof or the top apartment of a building in Kharkiv, and also a visiting 57-year-old grandmother, Halnia Chernyshova. The family had been living on the top floor when the Russian drones struck their building in the industrial district, setting 2 entrances ablaze. Quote, a young couple, says the Euromonitor Press, quoting them, a young couple, they had just bought an apartment, had a child here, and the whole family was gone, said the neighbour Oksana, describing how the blast waved through them from the 6th floor. The attack claimed 7 lives in total and injured 25 others. Dozens of relatives yesterday, friends and neighbours gathered to say farewell to the killed family. This is what Russian liberation looks like. They're liberating humans from their lives, from their loved ones. It's horrendous. That's not liberation. That is war crime after war crime after war crime. So again, we're not going to be focusing on last night. There's not too much information, but from 2 nights ago, Zircon, in that big strike, there were some unknown missiles added. Well, this appears to be the unknown missiles on the infographic. The unknown missile, see overnight report attack, was the nuclear-capable hypersonic Zircon missile. It's the 14th time it's been used by Russia in the war, so there's evidence of it there. Ukraine claims its arrival showed low accuracy and a weak warhead for the missile launched from a complex near Reservne in Crimea. Sorry, it appears I can't speak. Okay, what else? So the Flex American manufacturing facility that was hit 2 nights ago. I mean, this is huge. Like, I'm surprised that we've not heard anything from the American government officially on this. Some people are expecting there to be at least some kind of announcement, some kind of reaction from the government, as one of their industrial concerns has been hit, and it wasn't to do with the war. And the idea is that these American industrial commercial concerns should act as a deterrent for Russia to attack. That was the point of the mineral deal. That exploitative deal was supposed to be like, if we sign this deal and we have Americans working in Ukraine, then the Russians won't attack. And it's like, well, really? Because they've just literally blown up the Flex facility there. So overnight, one of the largest American investments in Ukraine, Flex, an active member of the American Chamber of Commerce, was hit by Russian missiles. It was not only an attack on Ukraine, it was an attack on American business. 2 missiles struck the factory where 600 employees were working the night shift. Thanks to strict safety protocols, every life was saved. Russia is not only devastating Ukraine, it's destroying and humiliating American business, says Andy Hunter, who is actually hit, I think, there speaking. Russia is not only the region neighbors the EU and has been considered the safest region in Ukraine. So this is Zakarpattia. Definitely not so now. We call on President Trump to stand with American business and to confront Vladimir Putin's campaign of destruction. There's been a deafening silence, I think, from the Americans as far as I can understand. And in fact, it is still burning there. So in Mukachevo, the fire on the Flex electronics plant hit by Russian strike on the 21st is still not fully extinguished, according to Ukraine's state emergency service. So huge devastation done to that place, which was a fully non-military site, at least according to all concerned. Now, the Russian propagandists have started talking about this. Meanwhile, in Russia, state TV is openly mocking Trump by describing their bombing of US-owned Flex electronics factory as, quote, destroying Western investments. So even the propagandists they're doing 2 things here. One, they are admitting it wasn't a military concern. It was a Western business investment. And 2, they are mocking Trump and the US. Why has the US not responded to this? Like, they can just get away with this. Get away with actually bombing the site and then get away with mocking the Americans thereafter. Remember when Scott Bessent said that the US investments in Ukraine would serve as an implicit security guarantee, says Julia Davis from the Daily Beast and Russian Media Monitor. Yeah, I remember that. I just said it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll sign a minerals deal. The Russians won't attack. Oh, they just blown up an American factory and we're not going to say anything. There's no deterrence at all. It's a joke, absolute joke. And fascinating that the Hungarian president, so not the Prime Minister Viktor Orban, but they have a president as well, a guy called Tamás Suyok, he condemned the Russian missile attack, calling it the Russian missile attack. And then within the hour, I think 15 minutes or so, he had edited his post to take out the word Russian. So he condemned the Russian missile attack on Mukachevo, but by the way, it's just over the border in Zakarpattia, so it's fairly near Hungary, but quickly edited his post, removing the word Russian and leaving only missile attack. The strike on a Flex plant injured 19 people. Both Suyok and Foreign Minister Shehato again called for peace. But interesting, taking out the word Russian. We've seen that. We've seen the Americans do that in the Trump administration. We've seen a number of pro-Russian entities do that. Now, Ukraine did have a strike last night. I mean, I said we've got really nothing from Ukraine. There is one hit that we know about, and it's again the Druzhba oil pipeline. So this is at Unechia or Vysokoye. The AFU launched a HIMARS missile strike apparently on an oil loading station in Vysokoye, and that is caught on therms data and actually caught on camera as well, really significantly burning. Now, this is hot on the Ukrainians taking out the Druzhba pipeline previously, and then the Russians working to fix it as soon as possible because it supplies hydrocarbons to both Slovakia and Hungary, and they want to keep them on side. Hungary had warned Ukraine about this, and Ukraine have answered the warning by hitting the Druzhba pipeline again. So Unechia oil pumping station in Bryansk region of Russia was targeted again yesterday evening, and there's a view from the highway. It's significantly on fire. So that is another big hit. There it is on the firms data. Fire on the territory of the Unechia pumping station, visible on NASA's firms data, and stopping the Druzhba pipeline again. So just to give you some idea of where this is, so you've got Unechia there. The Druzhba pipeline goes through Ukraine down to Hungary and Slovakia. They're trying to hit it inside Russia. It also goes on the way to through Belarus and Poland to Rostock up there, and then Leuna down in more southerly Germany. And there seems to be a pipeline that connects Ust-Luga, which is St. Petersburg area, as on the way to the Baltic Sea, and that then connects down to Unechia. So it's a really important place. And the strikes on Unechia are also part of a campaign to reduce the production capacity of Russian, and in this case Belarusian, oil refineries. Mazur receives its oil from the Druzhba pipeline. Thus, by attacking Unechia, it is possible to indirectly stop the work of the Mazur oil refinery, and that, one presumes, is possibly here in Belarus. So, in fact, it is. That's exactly where it is. So that is an important hit. And of course, that's then going to annoy the hell out of the Hungarians again. And lo and behold, it has. So Slovak and Hungarian foreign ministers have sent a joint letter to the European Commission after another Ukrainian drone strike on the Druzhba pipeline, urging Brussels to act over what they describe as a serious threat to energy security. Now, it is true. It is a serious threat to energy security. Ukraine is not helping Slovakia and Hungary. In a sense, they have a real right to be peed off here. But Ukraine can just say, hang on, what the hell are you doing buying Russian hydrocarbons that gives Russia money directly to fund the war and kill Ukrainians? So, of course, we're going to damn well take this out. And you need to find alternative hydrocarbon sources rather than buying off these bastards. So that would be the response. So Peter Shihato says, last night the Druzhba pipeline was attacked again for the third time in a short period, cutting off the oil deliveries to Hungary. This is a clear attack on our energy security and another attempt to drag us into the war. It will not succeed. We stand for peace and our national interests. And there's been a delightful response from the Polish foreign minister, who in a direct response to that tweet says, Peter Shihato, you have as much solidarity from us as we have from you. we give you as much love and support from Poland as you give us, you complete bastards. That's how I'd read that. Brilliant international diplomacy on Twitter in 2025. So the Polish cutting the Hungarians no slack there at all. Now, Novorossiysk, again, not last night, although the Druzhba pipeline, Unechia, was hit last night. This is from 2 nights ago. It is still on fire, as you can see there. This is a 5 million tons a year oil refinery, a huge component of the Russian oil output. And as you can see from this footage, I don't know where that's from, maybe local firefighters, it's been hacked by the Ukrainians here or something, but that refinery is burning big time and still burning. So that is a serious issue for the Russians there. As you can see from these images, a lot of oil going up in smoke there. So that remains. And then I did a video yesterday on that Jankoy train being hit. So the Russian rail logistics is still being hit, and that affects their ability to get gasoline, petrol, petrol, diesel, oil around to feed the army, but also to feed the local civilian populations. We'll return to that in a second. Right, a source on Telegram told us about, says Max25 translating a Russian here, I think, told us about the real consequences of the drone attack on the strategic port of Olya. So if you remember, that ship was sunk in Olya Port 4, or Port Olya 4, and the ship sunk, and it was supposedly a ship containing cargo of Iranian components for Shaheds, as well as ammunition. And that's in the Astrakhan region. So to continue, despite the artificial downgrading the object's status, in fact, weapons from Iran arrive at the port. And the authorities' statements about downed drones and minor consequences, the port's functions are still paralyzed. I don't know if this is a Ukrainian source, actually, but anyway, the port's functions are still paralyzed. According to the source, the drones destroyed the CE customs and port's infrastructure. The footage of a huge dry cargo ship sunken in a canal where only a piece of the stern and mast stick out of the water, which are published online, is far from all the damage from the attack. Logistics from Iran and Turkey have been paralyzed. To this day, many ships are at anchor, a convenient place for approaching from the sea near the shore, the port. Ships are loading and unloading but cannot pass. The port's work has been suspended. In other words, the strike on that port of Astrakhan, or the port of Olya in Astrakhan, has been phenomenally impactful. It's not just sinking a ship. There are actually drones that took out port infrastructure, and it is now activity at that port has been suspended in the Caspian Sea. That is huge. Ukrainian Navy forces destroyed a Russian drone base. So this was reported yesterday. If you remember, I said 2 powerful explosions rocked occupied Sevastopol around 3:35 the previous night near the Pivdeny airfield on Cape Chersonez. Likely hitting a Russian Black Sea Fleet military site. Fires broke out on the scene, confirmed by NASA firms. So that's what it looked like when I reported it yesterday morning. Well, now we hear that the Ukrainian forces destroyed a Russian drone base there in occupied Sevastopol. Up to 3 Mohajer 6 drones and 2 4-post drones. So those 4-post drones are really expensive. They are like Bayraktars, a big reconnaissance, but can also fire missiles. Used to monitor the Black Sea were eliminated. So this takes out reconnaissance capabilities for the Russians in the Black Sea area. Now we're going to do a little bit. I know I've been speaking for a long time already, but it's just worth noting that there's been an awful lot of talk about the FP-1 drone and the FP-5 cruise missile that the Ukrainians are presently manufacturing. So let's talk about that. Andrew Perpetua gives us some context, and excuse the swear words here. Imagine, says Andrew Perpetua, having drones F your air defense for over a year straight, specifically targeting your TEL, so your transporter erector launchers and radars every single day. So we're reporting quite often book launchers were absolutely taken out for a couple of months in a row, just book after book after book. Then we've had S300 launches. I reported on a TEL being taken out the other day, exploded in quite some grandeur. We have had all sorts of radars hit in Crimea, particularly, whereby the Ukrainians, the Primary unit, has been sending particular drones to take out a whole host of different radars, really expensive radars, and air defense units over Crimea, but that's probably happening in a number of places. So that's been going on. That degradation has taken place basically since May 2023, I think, in a serious way, but certainly over the last year. So imagine having drones F your air defense for over a year straight, specifically targeting your transporter erector launchers and radars every single day, just completely effing them over and over again, and not realizing the purpose behind the campaign was to open up the skies for cruise missiles. So who wins, a $20,000 drone or a multi-million-dollar radar? The $20,000 drone that you can produce like 1,000 per day, or the radar that you can make 2 per year. So this is important. Like all of this degradation, we've been wondering kind of what's the reason for this. I mean, there are obvious reasons, like it degrades Russian capabilities, but what's the ultimate goal here? Is it for close air support for Ukrainian planes to come and help do things on the front line? or help take out targets closer to the front line. No, it's likely clearing the way for the scaled serial production of decent drones and missiles by the Ukrainians themselves, so they can flatten key targets in particularly, let's talk about Crimea, right across Crimea. I mean, that's the end of the Russian military capability across Crimea, arguably, because if this is true, that the Ukrainians are now producing around 3,000 FP-1 long-range drones per month. That's about 100 a day, matching Russia's Shahid output, but at less than a third of the cost. So each FP-1 costs roughly $55,000 compared to $193,000 for a Shahid. Built with simple plywood frames and carrying up to 60 to 120 kilogram warheads. We see, no, that's the FP5. So this is the FP1 here in that image, and it's got a range of up to 1,600 kilometers. So that can hit Yelabuga. 3,000 of those a month. They have apparently 60% of the long-range drone hits have been these drones. Then you're thinking, wow, are they stockpiling these at the moment to just wipe out Crimea? They've taken out the radars, they've taken out the air defense, then you send in these bad boys. And they've now released footage of the launch of FP1s. So you're the timing of this is important. Like, why would they suddenly release footage of this? Some people are saying, just keep it quiet. Just why do this at all? But I think there's an element of PR here. Of course there is. Firepoint releasing this, saying, look what we've got. Degradation of the air defenses and the radar. You're just like, the Russians must be cacking themselves a little bit at the moment. And we are hearing Russian propagandists talk about this on national TV. So this is the FP1, and it's an interesting launch system whereby it's got some kind of, I don't know, jet propulsion to get it off the ground, and then that drops off the back. As you can see, it's got that. So you remember the other day I talked to you about a drone that looked like a Luti drone because it's got that upside down V there. And I said, that looks like a Luti drone, but this is an unknown drone. It looked like a Luti drone without the landing gear. This was it. There's no landing gear. Why is there no landing gear? Because it doesn't take off with wheels. Why does it not take off with wheels? Because it has that thing that has some kind of jet propulsion that gets it out into the air, and then it drops that bit off the back. And the FP5, which is your big cruise missile, massive bad boy, has a very similar launch mechanism. So this is now an FP5 video being released to show how this is launched, and you can see much bigger, looks like a doodlebug from the Second World War, launches in a similar fashion, and when it gets up in the air, it then jettisons the launch module, or whatever you want to call it. As you can see there, it just drops off the back, and there it goes, drops off the back, and then it goes on the rest of its way. Now, if they are making them, they're making them one a day apparently at the moment. So already they should be stockpiling, because I don't know that they've used FP5s. I mean, there are some claims that they have. They might have been using them. Who knows? Unetsia might have been hit by these. But I imagine they're keeping, they'll be using these much cheaper drones to hit places like Unetsia and so on and so forth. They're going to be making these at the rate of 7 a day at some point. Again, autumn is looking very, very good for Ukraine if all of these data points are to be trusted, right? If the numbers are to be trusted, and if we can trust that which we can, because we've seen the images of the Ukrainians taking out Russian air defenses. Crimea is going to be in a spot of bother. I think Novorossiysk. This is what I do at night because I'm that cool. I go to bed at the moment thinking, right, if I was Ukraine and I had 14 of these missiles, what would I strike? And there are 3 things I've come up with. Number 1, Yelabuga. I would just take out Yelabuga, stop them producing drones. Number 2 would be Olenia airfield and similar airfields where they have Tupolev strategic bombers, and take those bombers out. Right, so I'd have 9 going at Yelabuga and 5 up to Olenia, and then I'd have drones accompanying them as well, and blah 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 blah, whatever. Right, you've got more of these, you can do even more. So then my third option would be Novorossiysk, and I would absolutely hammer the Black Sea Fleet in Novorossiysk. What a victory that would be if the remaining ships in the Black Sea Fleet were taken out as they were docked in Novorossiysk. Just what a PR win that would be. So those are my thoughts. Watch out for the autumn. Let's hope that they really are producing this stuff at the rate that they claim. Right, my hits and losses videos are too long at the moment because there's too much to talk about. There's everything happening at the moment. Right, bad news for Ukraine. Tongue-in-cheek sort of here. Bad news is that Russia's finally got rid of its most useless general, allegedly on health grounds. So Alexander Lapin was heavily criticized for retreating from Kharkiv in 2022. He then dismantled a border guard unit in Kursk before Ukraine's invasion. Now his Sumy invasion looks doomed, and he has been shunted off sideways. Russia dismissed Alexander Lapin, accused of fleeing the east and missing Ukraine's offensive in Kursk. He led the Sever group in Kursk, Sumy and Kharkiv, and was replaced by Yevgeny Nikiforov, who apparently is not very good either. Lapin has also commanded the center group and retreated during Ukraine's 2022 counterattack. Yeah, and he was also responsible, I think, for war crimes too. So, like, he's been moved sideways, which some people are like, that's a shame, because actually he was a really terrible general. But it's a really indicative, I think, moment that of how things are going for the Russians. Now, how are things going for the Russians in terms of fuel? Well, you can see all sorts of videos. There are videos showing loads of garages with they keep taking down the prices. So you've got 0, 0, 0, 0, and then a weird type of fuel where they still got that in the station, and then 0, 0, 0. Like, there's no price alongside because they don't stock it. They're running out in a number of places. Videos on the spiraling gasoline crisis. So if they're not changing them to 0, then they're consistently whacking the prices up. And these videos are flooding Russian social media today as prices at service stations are changed on a nearly hourly basis to reflect worsening shortages. Authorities attempt to calm the population. Then we have Yevgeny Istrobin talking about Izvestia, so this is a Russian outlet, published an excellent article about the fuel crisis in the Russian Far East. So this is the Far East. I will provide individual quotes with my comments. So, I'm not going to go into the quotes from the articles here. I'll just put his comments. Specified volumes partially went to the center of Russia and partially went to the gas stations of the refinery owners. In the south of Russia, oil depots are empty. All fuel is sold off the wheels. There are no reserves. Fuel has been urgently removed from Siberia, which is why the Far East has gone into deep deficit. VINKS or VINKS, I don't know. Vertically integrated holdings are afraid to sell fuel at free prices. This leads to market imbalance. Prices are kept low, but there is no fuel. Officially, inflation is low, so prices are artificially kept low, so it doesn't affect inflation negatively. But the reality is, gas stations are empty and prices are sky high. This is how it was in the USSR before the collapse, and this is generally excellent news. Delayed scheduled repairs can lead to serious breakdowns. Then there will be the most severe crisis. Quote, at a meeting with Alexander Novak, a decision was made to completely ban gasoline exports from Russia, and the volumes of fuel missing for the domestic market were decided to be purchased from Belarusian producers. Too late. Onechta was broken yesterday. So Onechta was blown up. That's key. So that's, stuff that can come maybe from Belarus to Russia. So market were decided to be purchased from Belarusian producers too late. Onechta was broken yesterday. Belarus will not help. I laugh, says Istrobin. Who will allow you to cancel the excise tax? Yes, you can go to jail for such proposals. What's he talking about? According to Sergei Tereshkin from Open Oil Market, the risks of undersupply on the fuel market can only be mitigated by increasing the standards for exchange sales, as well as fines for failure to comply. Increasing supplies to the exchange should be more profitable than reducing them, and the expert believes. Simplest and most effective way to regulate the price of gasoline is a temporary reduction in the excise rate, which can affect the reduction of prices for the consumer and ensure the preservation of the efficiency of oil refineries, says Tamara Safanova. But of course, if you reduce the excise, then you're not getting the tax in. So yeah, we can reduce the cost of the fuel at the pump by not having any tax on it, but most of the cost of fuel at the pump is tax. So, and that goes to the government. So currently the excise rate on fifth class motor gasoline is 17,088 rubles per tonne, on diesel fuel 12,120. And the difference is an additional driver for the excess cost of gasoline relative to diesel fuel, she reminds. So Istrabin continues, and also yesterday the news came out Kazakhstan is strengthening control on the border with Russia in order to prevent the export of fuel from the country. This is great news. The oil pipeline to Belarus was bombed. Kazakhstan will protect its national interests, and the articles above show that the situation is even worse than I expected. Scheduled repairs at the refineries are due to begin soon. The oil depots in the south are empty. Belarus and Kazakhstan will not help. The crisis will deepen. It's a big problem. Now, I talked to you yesterday about Trump possibly changing his tune on Ukraine. You can never tell, though. He's only as good as his last 10 minutes, but he had that picture of him pointing at Putin and then compared it to Nixon poking a finger at Khrushchev, and then said that Ukraine should be able to strike Russia deep inside Russia, because otherwise it's like a sports team only being able to defend and never being able to go on the offense, and they can't win. So he's talking about Ukraine winning now and hitting Russia deep. So that's a massive change. So I did a whole video on that yesterday, but it's all over the place in terms of what's going on with the US and Russia. So very quickly, Trump has decided to withdraw from peace talks between Putin and Zelensky. He's basically leaving up to Putin and Zelensky to agree whether they can meet. And if they can't meet, then it won't be, this is my speculation, it won't be Trump's fault. If you can't get to meet, it won't be your fault. But we know that Zelensky's like, I'll meet, not a problem. So if they don't meet, it's going to be Putin's issue. And this could lead the US to have permission to then go hard on Russia, because he's getting fed up now potentially of Russia not playing ball. But it's going in circles, says the Kyiv Independent. Trump sets another deadline for peace in Ukraine. It's another 2-week deadline. It's like, if peace is not reached in 2 weeks, then blah blah blah, or a meeting's not sorted out in 2 weeks. So, but we've heard this before: 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 week. So Lindsey Graham has again threatened tough legislation. So he's talking about making Russia their state terrorist or state sponsor of terrorism. So if you make that official, then it kind of locks in the US into seeing Russia as the enemy in a more formal way. So again, we've got Lindsey Graham going hard on the rhetoric, but we've heard that before. So it's going in circles. Quote, "We will know within 2 weeks whether there will be peace in Ukraine. After that, we'll have to take a different tact," Trump told conservative commentator Todd Starnes. But of course, how many times have we heard that? But Lavrov here has been the problem. So Sergei Lavrov has said we must have a veto on security guarantees for Ukraine. What are you doing having you're the enemy. You can't put no one put a veto on you having North Korean troops come to your aid, right? So you can't put a veto on what troops are in Ukraine, but they're saying they can. And of course, if that's the case, then they're stopping security guarantees, which is stopping peace proposals. So this is Lavrov effectively saying there can't be peace. So Lavrov's refusal to provide Ukraine with security guarantees, says Bloomberg, has effectively disrupted talks between Russia and the United States. So that's possibly why you've got Trump getting peed off, right? So Lavrov's pushback on security guarantees has effectively fractured Russia's talks with the US. A European official with knowledge of the matter said the Kremlin may now try to convince the White House to abandon the push for security guarantees for Ukraine and downgrade the Putin-Zelensky meeting to one with lower level officials in an effort to dodge new US sanctions, the official said. Now, if the US agrees to that, then they are just let's give up, because they are too weak. Trump surely can't do that, because he's in public said an awful lot that, but this has happened before. But this should be permission for the US to go hard on Russia. Trump's optimism is fading, according to the Washington Post. Everyone is trying to control him, including Putin. His hopes for summits with Putin and Zelensky have not been realized. He has the backup plan in the form of organizing a top-level Russian-Ukrainian meeting, but that's without the two leaders, and he's called for that. So, how Trump's Ukraine peace push stalled out in 4 days. Recent optimism has faded, and Trump is looking for new answers. Well, the only answer is going hard on Ukraine. Meanwhile, Matt Gaetz has suggested that Russia joins NATO. So you still got wingnuts like Matt Gaetz and the MAGA end of things being nutjobby.
I've got an idea. Offer NATO membership to Russia. Of course, for this carrot, Trump would need to get everything he wants out of Putin regarding the end of hostilities, economic cooperation, and territorial disputes. Before you suggest I'm crazy,
you're crazy
thinking about NATO and Russia as partners, the idea has been floated by foreign policy thinkers on the right and left for some time.
Yeah, but this wasn't when Russia was at war with a European nation. So, this was at the height of relationships. And even then, it was a bad idea then. Honestly, nuts. And then I'm gonna do a whole separate video on this, so don't worry. But I'm just going to tell you that Trump's intelligence chief, the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has ordered the halt to intelligence sharing on Russia-Ukraine peace talks among Five Eyes allies. Five Eyes being Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and the US. We share intelligence. Tulsi Gabbard, who is a Russian agent, in my opinion, has ordered the US not to share intelligence over these peace talks with intelligence sharing allies. So on the one hand, Trump is in a really good position to go hard on Russia. And on the other hand, wingnuts like Matt Gaetz and Tulsi Gabbard, and Tulsi Gabbard is the heart of the government, are doing things in favor of Russia. It's just bonkers. Right, I'm going to do a live later on tonight, or this afternoon, 7 p.m. tonight UK time, 7 p.m. UK time, 5 p.m. Kiev time, with people from, or someone from Jiggerspor to finish off. We're going to do the raffle tonight, so you can win one of 3 prizes: a downed Russian drone, a goodies bag and pack and patches and flag and whatnot from Jiggerspor, and some artwork, traditional and modern hybrid, a piece of art from a Lviv arts house. One of those 3 things you can get. So for every $20 you donate to this great cause, you get a ticket. So more tickets, more chance of winning. And we're going to do a live raffle tonight on that video. And then we're going to start a new campaign for Car for Ukraine, because we're going to be driving out some cars to Lviv at some point in the near future. Bogdan, who I interviewed recently, is the recipient, or the Drone Lab is a recipient of this Jiggerspor initiative, and they produce drones for particularly the 47th Brigade, and that interview is absolutely fab. So if you don't understand what this is raising money for, go and check out my live interview with Bogdan from Drone Labs. It was absolutely fascinating. Loads of really intricate details about drones and whatnot. But please come and join in, and we'll do that live raffle tonight. Take care, everybody, and speak to you soon.